I'm Greg.
And I'm Eric.
And this week we have a very special guest, Mr. Daniel Rinaldi. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us through all the technical complications. That we appreciate it. So, Daniel, if you wouldn't mind just kind of telling our listeners a little bit about yourself.
So, like you said, my name is Daniel Rinaldi. I am currently a therapist in the state of Massachusetts. I am a dad. I am a former lead singer of a band. That's pretty much what I got going on.
That's a lot.
It is a lot.
That ain't nothing.
So let's I want to touch on the band thing.
Okay.
Real fast. So Bedlight for Blue Eyes.
Yes.
So I years ago actually was in a band, and we played with you guys here in Delaware at the Harmony Grange. You were like the first real band that we played with. And we recorded with the individual who used to run it so we could play with you guys. So that's kind of that was my introduction to your music.
That's awesome.
I don't even remember how long ago that was.
Very long time.
It was.
Greg, you said years ago.
It was. I mean,
I would say decades ago.
I think it may have been early, mid 2000s, maybe.
Yeah, probably somewhere
2006?
around 06, 07.
Yeah. And I remember though, it was just, I don't know, for us, it was kind of cool to take the stage and play with actual big bands. But yeah, I remember, I can't remember what was the name of the album that came out around that time with Waste My Time.
Life on Life's Terms was that album.
Okay. And my wife and I were listening to that album a couple of days ago, and she's like, I used to have most of these songs on my MySpace page. Back when you could embed the players.
Yeah.
And
have you seen? I think Facebook is now letting people put music songs on their Facebook pages when people log on. So it only took them it probably took them about 20 years to catch up to MySpace at this point.
Dude, Tom was letting us do that on MySpace, 20 years ago. But let me ask you, so Bedlight for Blue Eyes, what are some of your memorable moments and achievements that stand out to you when you were making music?
Definitely, I was 18 when I joined the band, and I was fresh out of dropping out of college and joined the band.
Okay.
I was a fan of the band before I joined, so I had been super bummed that they lost their singer and answered a MySpace bulletin to wrap back around to MySpace, and was like, hey, I'll audition. Got the job. So obviously signing my first record deal to Trustkill Records, which was an iconic Jersey label and still an iconic label in the scene. So definitely signing to my first record label. Just touring in general. There was something so special about touring. Obviously, like you said, being able to go to these venues like the Harmony Grange, and I'm not sure which show it was. It could have been either we were on tour. I think we were on tour with Sound the Alarm and went there. We were on tour with Mayday Parade and went there. We were on tour.
You know what?
Tokyo Rose, I think. It
was Tokyo Rose.
Okay.
It was Tokyo Rose, yeah.
So it was the Sound the Alarm Tokyo Rose tour. So those were really special because you got to play these intimate shows where you got to you were in the parking lot with the people at the show. So you got to connect and kind of see everyone. And then towards the end, obviously releasing an album, it was another big one. But definitely towards the end was touring with Newfound Glory and Census Fail, which was the highlight, right? We were kind of no one knew it, but we were kind of on our way out. But doing that last thing was definitely really cool for me at least.
So when you say on your way out too, so I've never been in like a kind of like a big band like touring. So is it one of those things where like everyone just kind of knew like this was it, or was it just like the vibe wasn't really there anymore? Or
so we had a couple member changes after a few tours. So we had done like one of our bigger like co-headliners right after we recorded was with Mayday Parade. That was an amazing tour. They were just kind of coming into their own, and they had just gotten finished recording as well. Our albums actually dropped on the same day. And we did that. We had a couple member changes. And it was just one of those things where we felt like we should be touring with bigger bands and kind of changing with the times and having a label that supported that. And it got to the point where, everyone had bills to pay. Everyone was a lot older than me too. So like I was 18, these guys were already mid to late 20s when I joined the band. So my life was obviously a lot different than theirs. So towards the end, it was kind of just like the vibe was weird. The tours weren't coming the way they should have, or they weren't as good as we wanted them to be for where we felt we were at. So we were just, I think it was me who kind of called everyone and was like, I can't do this anymore. And then they were like, it almost felt like it was like, okay, great. Glad someone said it.
Now that's out of the way.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like life gets in the way almost.
Yeah. I think, like with any band, you get to that point where it's either you're making it on a certain level and you're able to sustain. Well, nowadays you're making it on some level. You're a really big nostalgia band, which is like huge in the scene right now, right? Where they can go and play festivals for like ungodly amounts of money. But like, yeah, like you just start to look at it and go like, am I going to go on tour, or am I going to miss my like brother's birthday or my kid's birthday or this holiday? Is it worth it to do that anymore?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember too, weren't you guys on one of the Punk Goes albums? Was it Punk Goes?
It was Punk Goes 90s. So that
Punk Goes 90s.
Okay.
That I always say, unfortunately, wasn't me. That was the previous singer. Because I would have loved to have like had that song in the repertoire, because it's like Jumper is such like a
Jumper.
Hit,
right. Okay.
It's just a song that everyone knew.
Oh yeah.
You're blowing my mind right now. I didn't know that Punk Goes anything but pop. I only knew Punk Goes pop.
No,
Punk Goes
crunk.
It goes 80s. Yeah, man.
Okay.
You're missing
Yeah,
out.
I'm ready.
there's
I'm ready because I got the
amount.
Punk Goes. Okay, all right. I have some research now.
You are
because
missing
I
out.
love that Punk Goes. This is my first one too because I love Jumper. That's fantastic.
Some of them are really good, and then some of them are really awful. Like there's
I'm sure.
There's one of my favorite ones. I'm not sure which one it was on or if it ever made one. Maybe I'm making it up. But a band, Hands Like Houses, did a cover of Torn. And it's like unbelievable. Like it's one of my favorite covers ever.
Hands Like Houses are that is one band that like now I listen to them a lot, and they're I think Australian.
I believe so.
Or yes, and they Eric, if you haven't checked them out, they're good.
Fantastic.
They're down under.
They are. Okay, so Bed Light for Blue Eyes ends, and then what kind of transpires after that?
I think for me, like after it ended, I definitely like fell into that like into a weird space of like, what the hell do I do now? So like kind of like felt really bad and really sorry for myself. Didn't really jump right back into any sort of musical stuff, kind of took a break. And it was weird because we broke up and then played like a farewell show like a year later. So it was like a very weird thing, like to just like, we all started living life and then we played this farewell show. And so that was a weird thing to just like get back on stage to like tease ourselves. But after I kind of like pulled myself out of like the hole I was in, I started to kind of like write and record. I went out to LA for a little bit and kind of wrote and record with some like songwriters, producers. Nothing ever really kind of went anywhere. It was all just kind of like busy work and things like that. I filled in for a band called Land and Fall up in Massachusetts for a while. Then I recorded a solo EP that I'm super proud of. Like, it never went anywhere. Like, I think the biggest thing that ever happened to it was like it got played in Hollister a whole bunch. One of the songs just spun in Hollister forever. So like the royalties were cool. So that worked out. And then after that, like I was kind of like, again, like life happens and you're trying to figure out what to do. And I ended up going back to school.
Okay. So, and then you went back to school.
Did you end up wearing a lot of Hollister for that?
Yeah,
reason?
Did you get a bunch of Hollister?
Did you feel like some pride for that?
No,
like,
it was a bummer.
No
one gave me anything, which would have, not that I was a big Hollister person, but it was definitely cool to like walk into the local mall and all of a sudden like one of my solo songs was playing, which was really cool. Like I remember being able to like walk into like a Hot Topic or like a Pac Sun or something like that and hear Bedlight playing. But like it was another thing to like walk into like this major store and be like, oh, that's just me. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And so for something like that, do they have to like seek permission from you, or you just get a like anyone can use, like how does that work for music in general?
So it was the weirdest how that happened was the weirdest thing. And I thought it was like a scam at first. So like someone had hit me up that places music in major stores. So it's kind of like a publishing thing where they kind of scour the internet and find songs that they think would work in the stores. And then they sign like a publishing deal with you almost. So basically like this guy had hit me up and asked for that song to be put in there. I was like, this has got to be fake, right? Like this is weird. Yeah. But I had someone money? Right. Like I had someone check it over and they were like, hey, like, why not? And sure. Long story short, like it was in there. It spun like worldwide in Hollister and it was awesome.
That's very cool.
Cool. So then when you went back to school, what did you major in once you decided to kind of go that route?
So when I first went to college, I was just a straight up like music education major, music performance major. But anyone who's listening who's ever majored in music in school, it's a whole lot of like you come out and you can't really do much besides like either grind and perform or eventually become a professor. So like that really wasn't my goal. So when I went back the second time, I was kind of doing like an early education track to become a teacher, but then I really wasn't feeling that either. So then that's when I got my bachelor's in psychology. And then I was like, at that point I was on a roll. So I was like, well, I'm just going to go get my master's. And then I got my master's in clinical mental health.
Okay.
That's my question for anybody that's in a major of something that I'm not sure. I always say, just tell me what the job is. Like,
right.
Somebody that majors in this, what is the job? I don't understand. This is from somebody that didn't graduate from college. I dropped out. I tried to go back twice. It's just not for me.
Yeah, it wasn't for me for a very long time.
That's great. That's good. I'm really glad to hear like a positive outcome for somebody that went back and was able to succeed. That's fantastic. Good. Never give up.
So then, so you worked in the field for a while after that, like after you graduated, correct? Like the just like the behavior like analysis field.
Right. So I was working even before that. I was working like in special education, in the applied behavior analysis field, kind of like in-home private work with children. And then I worked in like a middle school they call it like an autism room is what they called it. But I worked in the special education department for like 6 years. And then when I went back was when I kind of just focused back for my master's, focused all of my attention on then going into therapy.
Okay. Okay. So then after you did that, is that kind of what created what you are doing now? Or like, where did you get the idea for like the puppets and what you are doing now?
So things like that are always born from me kind of like whenever I feel a certain level of like stuck or a certain level of like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like what's going on? What's next? I kind of lean into the creative side. And I've always loved the idea of like transforming things in like creating a world, right? Creating a safe space for kids, for adults, which is basically what therapy is. But I was trying to think of ways that mostly that children at the time could kind of grab onto and make therapy more accessible. Therapy is very hard for children to come into, sit across from a stranger and be like, here's all of my problems and here's all of my trauma and here's all of this. So I was like, well, what can I do to create a safer space and separate myself from that very cold clinical aspect of therapy? And that's where the puppets kind of came in. And then I just kind of started to kind of get obsessive over like, this is their name, this is their character trait, this is their backstory, this is what they bring to the table. And you know, so far it's been a slow process, but it's something that like I wholeheartedly believe in, and it's something that like works. Like, you know, as silly as it might sound, and it's like, but I mean, look at anything else. Look at Sesame Street. Look at all these other things. Like, it works.
Well, and you know, I can tell you as someone who went through therapy when I was younger, for me it was very uncomfortable because it was like mom and dad are going to sit right across from you and they'll tell this individual everything that's wrong. And it was like, well, I'm not going to. Yeah, I'm going to not be completely honest. And so I feel like, you know, so I was kind of going through your website and looking through the different like puppets and the different things that you offer, and there's a lot of stuff on there that's just really cool and things that like I never even really thought about. But so each puppet plays a unique role, right? So could you kind of like explain like how those unique roles work and like how the puppets work and like how parents can kind of like commission, like how does the whole thing work?
Right. So each one, really the personalities were born from like me looking at the puppet and like kind of getting my own sense of like what it meant to me. You know, definitely. So each one has its own kind of basically emotion that it takes care of, right? Like, so there's one that's positive self-talk. There's one that's hygiene. There's one that's sleep. There's anxiety ones. There's just a bunch of different things that they tackle. And what I did from there was kind of created MNTL Town, which in my head was like, okay, what space does each person occupy? So there's a mindfulness one that does mindfulness and yoga in the park at MNTL Town, right? Then there's the other one, there's Mr. Grumps, who runs like the store in town, and you never leave with a grumpy face, right? So like he tells you it's okay to be grumpy, but you want to be able to move on from that. So I started to kind of piece together what role each puppet would play and how they would occupy this town. And then from there, I kind of went through what I could offer, right? So what I could offer was my own creative spin, which is I tell the story, right? So a parent could commission that their kid just deals with just regular general anxiety, nothing specific. So that would be where they don't have a specific thing they want to talk about. So I just get on there and I do, a however many minute video about anxiety so that the child or the adult could get a general understanding of anxiety, what it is, and kind of what are some things on how to deal with it. And then it gets personalized from there, right? Then you could commission a little bit more and get something where you tell me what your kid is specifically going through, so that when that kid sees the video, they're going like, whoa, that puppet's talking to me. That puppet knows what I'm going through, and they're giving me real life therapeutic advice, right? Like wellness advice to help me. And then from there, from my special education background, is where there's the social story aspect, which is very huge in the special education community, where you're able to kind of write these personalized stories that help a child to kind of understand like, whoa, I have a lot of trouble getting to bed. I need to develop a routine. Here's this story that you're going to be able to reference every time you need to go to bed and you're having a problem, that this puppet is going to be saying to you. So you could sit with that, right? And use it as a tool for you to be able to get in a routine and get to bed, right? I'm just using sleep as an example, but it could be used for hygiene. It could be used for bullying. It could be used for your schoolwork, whatever it might be. So like those tiers, like they gotta all go up in price depending on obviously like the customization, and social stories are obviously a bit longer, so they take up a little bit more space.
That's fantastic to hear. I've got my kids. I've got a son who just turned 9. My daughter, she's going to be 8 in just a couple of weeks. My son, he had, we think, every once in a while, it was usually around like testing time. They would say, "Oh, the big end of school year testing,
Mm-hmm.
Tummy aches. I can't go to school today." And I think that it could have been the teacher. She was great, but I think that she gave him. We think it was just massive anxiety because, like,
Mm-hmm.
his stomach would hurt in the morning, and then like I'd get home from work and he'd be perfectly fine, jumping all over me, and I'd go, "Hey, you seem like you're doing fine." The next day, tummy hurts again, and
Mm-hmm.
we were like, we nailed it down to that, but we were never able to actually do anything. So it's really nice to hear. I think that I can't be. Anytime that something happens to me, I feel I'm not the only person that ever has ever happened to. Have a kid with something like that happen. So I think people are going to be interested to hear things like that. Do you have like something do you have like a most popular thing, like the biggest hitter that you have?
I would probably say the puppet Mikey is probably like the biggest one. There is another one that I'm going to introduce, but I haven't yet. Mostly because if I get too many puppets, my wife is gonna lose her mind. But yeah, so like Mikey's about acceptance, and that's always a big one. I definitely think when I introduce this new one, it's gonna be more like so kids with like sleep trouble and nightmares. It's something I always struggled with when I was young. So it's one that's like super important to me. But yeah, like acceptance and anxiety are the big ones. And I think, one thing that you highlighted was like school is a big culprit, right? And school creates a lot of anxiety. And a lot of times kids can't talk to their parents. Like they can't find the way to do it because they don't know how to identify the emotion, and they don't know how to talk about it, or they don't want to disappoint their parent, right? So it's like, let's take that out of the equation and have this thing that is totally removed from that talk to you about it or give you what you need about it. I've even thought about doing like live sessions with people, to where like you could do something like that too, where it would be like a 1-to-1 kind of like live session where you'd be able to, like a kid like would be able to do that maybe before a test, right? Like before, at the end of the year, a big test is coming up, they'd be able to do the week before a session with one of these puppets that could make them feel a little bit better.
Sure. Yeah. That sounds like it would help.
Well, and I feel like too, like, I don't know, for a while it was always just like, well, just suck it up. You know, if something's wrong, just suck it up. You'll be all right. I was all right. And it's nice to know that there are options out there. And, you know, like going through, so I'm looking through the MNTL Town, like, the puppet list, and like, they're all really fascinating. So when you get an idea for one, do you design it yourself, or is this kind of like sent like, hey, this is what I want this puppet to look like, and this is the story? Do you then send that off to someone else to create, or are you the one that also designs do you have a puppet making studio?
I wish I did. I wish I did. So I've worked. So some of them have been created just for me, with the ideas of what was kind of in my head. And then other ones were kind of just like, they were really fantastic puppet makers. And I had seen them and I was like, whoa, that one is incredible. That one really, and I go through this process where I like send it to like 5 different people. And I'm like, hey, this is the story. This is kind of what I'm thinking for this puppet. What do you think? Do you think this would represent it? What about the eyes? What about the nose? Is the nose to this? Are the eyes too scary for a kid? Like, show it to your son. So I go through like this insane, in my opinion, insane process of like, it has to like hit a certain way. And I think that's like that's how I used to be with merch for the band. So like, I think that's like, I carry that over. So some of them are designed.
Sounds like the artist in you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like so many of them are just like, it's got to be this, it's got to be that. What about this? So some of them were designed directly for me, and other ones were just these fantastic puppet makers that I've kind of had the privilege of working, you know, with already had, and they just kind of like fit the purpose of what was there.
And so I'm sure you've received feedback now from parents and children. So like, what kind of feedback have you gotten since you've started doing this, and kind of introducing these puppets to children and adults?
I definitely, you know, I think it's a certain type, like, I always tell the parents to like go on there, like, see what your kid likes, right? Like, see what speaks to your kid, right? Because a lot of times if you're just a parent that like is going to buy it and just going to like show it to your kid, they might be like, meh. It's what I always ask when I have like a therapy intake, with a parent. Does your kid know that they're going to be entering therapy, right? So I think this is the same sort of thing, to where like, let your kid go on there and look at it. Let them be like really pumped on the character. Let them find what character speaks to them, rather than, you know, because although I have an idea, I also don't mind if someone says, hey, my kid really loves this one, but he struggles, or she or whoever struggles with this. I have no problem doing that. Like, they're not tied to like the thing. If someone's like in love with the guy Diz, right, the puppet Diz, but struggles with depression, I don't like, that's okay. We could
so
go
it's
there.
interchangeable.
Yeah, it's
that's
interchangeable.
very reasonable.
So, but like,
yeah, that's cool.
So I think like the feedback has been really cool from like the child standpoint, and then I've had like grown adults be really stoked on it, who were like big fans of like the Muppets, right, or big fans of Sesame Street, or big fans of like Fraggle Rock when they were growing up, and they're like looking at it going like, I think I might want one of these, or like I want to be able to interact with this. So like that's where like the live one-to-ones kind of came into my head, where I was like, what about an adult who just wanted to talk about their day to something a little different? And like that would be awesome.
Well, and I think that's cool because it kind of like helps, especially for adults, find that childhood spark. I mean, life is sometimes really difficult. And so Eric and I are going through that this week. And I think being able to discuss life and loss and just what's troubling you with someone like that would be awesome. That would be really cool.
I'm gonna tell some people at work. There was a passing of a coworker of ours, very close to everybody in the organization. Nobody's ever had anything like that happen to them, and everybody's just kind of coping. And I heard, and no offense to the counselor that came out, I think that I don't know if people weren't interested, but at one of our sites, no one was really going, and we were like, I think she was having a conversation with somebody, and they were like, I'm not really happy with that. With the person that came out for whatever reason. But this sounds like a great idea. I'm gonna tell them about you.
Yeah, 100%.
No, it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
It is fascinating
what you're doing. I love it. It's making me think, because I never thought I had heard. I don't want to say negative things about like child therapy, but I don't know. I mean, Daniel, you probably have heard of this. It can be negative, and this is more for like one-on-one in-person live sessions that hey, you bring your child to therapy, and they'll find something wrong, and they will make you the customer, or your child. They'll make your child basically the customer over and over again. I don't know if you've heard anything like that, or if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I will say it this way. Not all therapists are created equal, and not all therapy is the same, right? Me, myself, I'm very honest with especially when a child comes in. Hey, I don't necessarily know if this is right for your child right now. There are other ways where people might just take your money, right? And say like, hey, like, yeah, I'll take your kid for the next 3 to 6 months. And that's $100 and something in my pocket every week, right? So like, I definitely think there's a certain aspect of therapy that falls under that, and shame on them if that's what's going on, right? Like, I think that's where like a lot of stigma comes from, unfortunately, and why a lot of people, I know like Twitter's a big place where it's like, I don't need therapy, I go to the gym. Or I don't need therapy, I just do this. And I'm like, no, like it's different. Like you can't deal with that trauma like on a treadmill. Like that's not what it is. So I like, I always encourage people to therapist shop. A lot of people like, it sounds weird, but like if get that free 10 to 15 minute consult that a lot of therapists offer. And if you don't like them, don't go to them. I myself have a therapist, and it took me 3 tries to find the one that I'm working with now. And if it wasn't working, I would go find a different one. So I always encourage people to like, especially if you're entering your child into that, because I think sometimes it can do more harm than good if they're with somebody who's not working with them with the best intentions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it your format lends itself to not ever like trapping anything. You're delivering literal like therapy and advice and good intentions, not like, hey, it sounds like this is what's wrong.
Right.
And I feel like even when I was going, it was like, so what happened this week, and it was just like, I don't think anything. Like, I think this week was fine. It was like, oh, okay, cool, right on, brother. Yeah. You got 25 more minutes, so what do you want to talk about? It's like, this is a waste of my time.
and that's
probably good stuff in that.
I think that's the hardest part, is being able, how do you adapt to your client, right? Like my biggest thing that I tell people is I don't make you adapt to me, I adapt to you, because otherwise it's not your space, right? It's your therapy, not mine. There's been times, right, where I get the like, where you get to a certain point where you're like, you stop dead in your tracks, right? And you're like, oh man, like we have like 30 minutes left. Like what goes on? And that's where you get like, that's where like rapport building is so important, where you get to know the client enough that you're able to pull from like their likes, their interests, what they're into, where it's like, you know, there some days we talk about deep rooted trauma, and then other days we're talking about the video game that they're playing, and they're so stoked to show me the video. Like I'm the type of person, like, you want to show me a video game? Show me it. Like that's fine, because like I'd rather you show me something that you're so happy about, and we talk about those happy emotions and how we get to them, than like being like, nope, we're just going to sit in silence for the next 25 minutes because you have nothing to talk about. Which is why there's so many people out there innovating. Like there's people out there that doing virtual reality. There's people out there doing like strictly like video game therapy platforms. You know, play therapy is at an all new. I know people that do like Dungeons and Dragons in their therapy sessions, like all sorts of stuff. And like they, you know, again, like you're able to put yourself in a character and talk about, it's easier to talk about that character and what they're going through than it is sometimes to talk about yourself. So it's like those things are helping to break those walls down, I believe.
That sounds awesome. I've never thought about any of those other things. It sounds immersive almost, especially like the virtual reality one. What's the Facebook one where you're you can go in and be in the world with other people?
Metaverse, yeah, Metaverse.
Yeah, is it the Metaverse, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, sure, it probably lends itself. It's probably, you know, we're probably going through a really crude time where in like 10 years, maybe, we'll probably look back and go, oh, that was terrible. Like what that looked like back then. Like, I'm sure we'll look back and go.
One of the coolest things about VR, like people who have kind of spearheaded the VR therapy, is I was using a platform for a little bit, but I didn't have enough. There wasn't enough people who were like, I trust this, I'm into this. But you created your own avatar, and you were in like, you could meet in a virtual office, you can meet in space, you could meet in a forest, like you can meet in all these different places. So take a person with identity issues, right? Or take a person who's just, you know, so anxious to sit across face to face with somebody. They can now create this avatar that's whatever they want it to be, and they can meet wherever they want to be. They could be sitting on the moon, like talking to you, and it just creates another level of comfort, I think, for the right client, right? Like that's something that's for the right client. You're not going to get like my dad buying into like wearing a VR headset.
That's what I went to in my head was that's the
like,
person.
Yeah, like but you might get a 14-year-old, 15-year-old that's like, I have the Quest 3 and I'm really excited to do this.
Yeah, it's relatable
to
them.
And they'd feel probably the most comfortable they've ever been, you know,
100%.
making themselves. Yes, that's amazing. I never even thought about that, in that.
I met an individual yesterday at a resource fair, and they do their therapy with horses and just animals. And he said sometimes people, they just don't even really talk. They just kind of let the animals do the therapy for them. And it sounded interesting. And
that's actually where I did my my internship and my residency was in an equine practice.
Really? Yeah, so this is what this guy did, and he I think he said he had 3 or 4 locations here in Delaware, and then they have like an office, and he said that it's been really helpful to the people that have been coming. We talked about having him kind of bring some of those animals to our location.
Did you say 3 or 4 locations in Delaware?
Yeah.
That's so many for
Delaware.
I mean,
yeah. Delaware's not ginormous, but I mean,
wow.
Greg, that man right there in the middle of your shirt is a big supporter of horse therapy.
So I've heard. I heard it helped cure him for when he had his heroin addiction.
I believe it was. I think it was an everything addiction.
Yeah.
But if you listen, there's great interviews out there of him talking about it. And he has this, I wish I can't remember it off the top of my head right now, but he has this beautiful quote about horses. Like they have the ability to destroy everything around them, but the want to hurt nothing. So it's, it's just this, it's a very transformative thing. It seems weird at first thought, but once you get in there, it really is something magical.
And when this individual was, I don't want to say selling it because he wasn't trying to sell his services. He was just legitimately talking about it, but it sounded great.
Yeah.
Like it did. It sounded like he wasn't like blowing smoke, and it was just like, it sounded like what he knew what he was talking about, and it was actually very helpful. And yeah, we talked about bringing, where Eric and I work, we have individuals who have disabilities that go through some of our programs and that actually work for us, and he mentioned kind of coming out with those animals to help out those individuals, and I swear, like, none of that was around when we were kids. It wasn't. So I think having the options and being able to meet people where they need to be met, and being relative to that individual is as good as it can get, and having something like MNTL Town, or not just having to sit in a cold room with some 89-year-old dude that doesn't really care about what you have to say is huge.
Daniel, do you have anything else that you want to say, plug, bring up, talk about?
I just want to thank you guys for having me on, and also for dealing with my technical difficulties.
It happens for sure.
I'm Greg.
And I'm Eric.
And we are the Daddies. Thank you for listening.